Start. So welcome everyone. So welcome to all the participants who join. Welcome to the third webinar of our course. We are happy to see here so just quite many people. I'm pretty sure that more will join, so welcome. And I'm reminded that today is our third webinar of the teaching course, lesson planning. Today you will be talking about the lesson frameworks with our trainer, Olga Koval. So Olga, good evening.
Good evening. It's nice to be here and to see so many participants. Hopefully we'll see even more today.
Okay, yeah. So, and I'm reminding that we are working in the format of the webinars, that you can participate using the chat and type any questions or answers if the trainer just asked you some questions, And I do hope that we will have no electricity power cuts or whatever, and everything will go smoothly. And the recording of the webinar will be added in your material section in 24 hours, just for you to remember that. And I guess we can start. So you're welcome.
Okay, hello once again. So let me share the presentation. Okay, so first of all, before we start, let's check whether my connection is okay. If you can hear me well and if you can see me, please use any reaction or you can put a plus or whatever to the chat so that I know that no technical issues are here. Good. Okay. Yeah, so I can see your thumbs up, hearts. I can see your pluses. Okay, thank you so much. If I start lagging or my internet connection is unstable, please let me know in the chat and I will try to solve this issue as soon as possible. But hopefully everything will be okay today. So thank you for joining us today. And as Ina has already mentioned, we are continuing the series of webinars devoted to lesson planning. So last time you discussed lesson aims, how to set them effectively, how they can help us in the learning process and in the teaching process. And today we will discuss different teaching approaches and lesson frameworks. So in this webinar, we will talk about teaching receptive skills to our students and teaching systems to our students. So we will discuss different lesson stages, in which order we can have them in the lesson, whether we can change this order. And of course, we will have some practical tasks and some tips as usual. And before we start, as it is our third webinar, I would ask you to share your experience and share your expectations from today. So you can scan the QR code or you can follow the link, which Ina will send to the chat just in some seconds. And I would ask you just to answer only the first and the second question on the board, which you will see. Yeah, you can see the link in the chat. So you can follow the link or you can scan the QR code. So I will give you just a couple of seconds to open the board and then I will show it and I will explain what to do in case you have never used this tool before. Okay, so let's see what we need to do here. So I would ask you to type your answers to the questions in the first section and in the second one. So please answer the question, have you tried any ideas or tips from the previous webinars? Because it is our third webinar in this course. Yeah, and you can also tell us which ones, so which ideas or which tips have you already used? And the second one is, what do you want to learn today the most? So you know that we will be discussing teaching approaches and different lesson frameworks. So we will talk about teaching receptive skills and systems. to our students, like vocabulary, grammar, and functional language. But maybe some of these topics are like more interesting for you than others. So you can also mention it in the second section, and I will make sure like to pay more attention to the topics which are the most interesting for you today. So to type your answer, you can just click on a plus here, yeah, or here, and you will be able to type your idea. So when you are ready, you can click publish, and we will see your answer on the screen. You can also click on this big plus, yeah, and it will be like actually the same process. So let's just take, I guess, 20-30 seconds to answer the questions. If for some reasons the board does not work, you can also put your answers to the chat, so I will see them. Yeah, and if you have any technical issues, please also let me know in the chat. Maybe we can resend the link or show the QR code again. So if you still need to scan the QR code, here it is. Okay, so I can see no answers on the board yet, but I can see some in the chat. So Yulia says that she hasn't tried any tips or ideas yet. So we've got one idea on the board from the first webinar, collecting information of students and options for providing placement test. From the second webinar, not to plan too much for a lesson. Okay, wonderful. So I guess those are great things. So waiting for some more answers, for some more ideas. So you can either type on this board or you can use the chat. Yeah, and if you like some ideas on this board, you can also put a reaction. So you can add a heart, or you can add a comment if you want to. Okay, so I can see that some people are typing, so let's just wait for some more seconds. Okay, so hello to people who have just joined us. So the first task for today is to answer just two simple questions on the board, which you can see. You can find the link to this board in the chat. So if it doesn't work for some reason, you can type your answers to the chat and we will see them. Okay, so we've got the first reply to the second question, which says, you want to learn to, you want it to be more clear how to use different frameworks with different students and just understand the main idea of each framework. Okay, yeah, so we will discuss today we will talk about lesson frameworks. for receptive skills lessons, reading, listening, and for systems like grammar, vocabulary, and functional language. Okay, thank you. We'll make sure to have enough time for this today. Okay, good. So let's go on. But yeah, the link to this board will be available. So if you just feel like sharing more ideas on this board during the webinar, you will be able to do it. So you can find the link in the chat. Thanks a lot for sharing your ideas. Good. And so actually, today we will start with different approaches and methods. Yeah, so different teaching approaches. So you know that there are so many of them, and some of them are more popular and more common today. Others are considered to be more outdated, yeah, and not really often used in the classrooms nowadays. But yeah, so as for me, it's important for a teacher to know which approaches and which methods exist. Because all of them are based on some beliefs of how the learning process happens. Yeah, so how people learn, how people process new information. There is an idea and philosophy behind each of these approaches and methods. And if we know it as teachers, it will be easier for us to choose and purposefully use elements of some approaches and methods in our lessons. Or we can also decide to reject some of them purposefully because we don't agree with this concept. So we won't talk a lot about approaches and methods today, and you will be able to find more information in the webinar materials, which you have already received. But yeah, we will just look at some of the most common ones very quickly today, and I have a small task for you. So you will see some pictures on the screen. Each picture relates to one teaching approach or method. So your task will be to think and try to guess which approach or which method this picture relates to. If you are ready with the materials for this webinar, I think it will be an easy task for you. If you haven't looked through the materials yet, you can try to guess. Okay, I can see in the chat that the first picture is drilling. So drilling, it's a technique which is used, but do you remember the name of the approach in which such a technique as drilling is commonly used? Substitution drills. Yeah, so you're right. In this approach, substitution drills are often used. But do you remember the name of the approach? Okay. Not really, but in PPP, yeah, so drills can be used, like some elements of this approach. Okay, but you're right. Yeah, that's about drilling, obviously. And it's about audio-lingual approach. Audio-lingual, yeah, thank you, Jana. I can see the right answer in the chat. The idea of this approach is that language learning is very similar to the process of acquiring a new habit. So basically, according to this approach, yeah, for people to develop a habit, so it is needed to repeat one action, like a particular action, a particular movement or an activity, many times, and then it becomes habitual, yeah, and people can do it automatically without thinking. And according to audio-lingual approach, it's very similar to how people learn the language. So one of the main techniques which is used with this approach is drilling. Yeah, it's constant repetition of some phrases, of some words, and some sentences. According to this approach, when we repeat one structure again, and again, then we will be able to use it in the real life automatically, like almost without thinking. As you have mentioned in the chat, Irina, I agree with you, substitution drills are often used with this approach. And basically, like, for example, the teacher says, I have traveled to Japan, and students repeat, I have traveled to Japan. Then the teacher says, cook pizza, and students say, I have cooked pizza. The teacher says, travel by plane, and students say, I have traveled by plane. Yeah, so they just substitute a part of the sentence And the target structure, which is present perfect in this case, is not changed. It's used like in every sentence which they repeat. This approach is often criticized for lacking like meaningful communication, not providing students with some real life context, and for working with the language like mainly on the sentence level, on the phrase or on the sentence level. And this approach is rarely used as a solo approach or as a main approach in a modern classroom, but we do use a lot of elements of it in our work. And I guess that most teachers would agree that drilling is a nice technique which can be used to improve pronunciation. And also, as the audiolingual approach says, it can help students remember some structures, some language patterns better and use them more easily. But usually, today it is combined with the elements of some other approaches. Okay, let's go on and let's have a look at the next one. So which approach is this picture for? Your ideas? So you can see that there are some tools, like some paper, a pen, some tape, and pins. Okay, Irina thinks that's about the task-based learning. Okay, any other ideas? Yeah, and actually that's right. So this picture relates to task-based learning. So this approach is rather common and popular today. Very often it is combined with some other approaches, but sometimes, in some schools, it can also be used as the main approach. So as you can see from the name, in the center of this approach is a practical task or a project. So that is the center, that is the main aim of a lesson or of a series of lessons. So the main focus is on completing a particular task, which is usually real life related and related to the needs and the interest for our students. So the aim of the lesson is not to learn a new grammar structure or some new vocabulary, but to complete a task. And the language is an instrument which helps us to complete a task. Then the language, like some language structures are still learned, so some vocabulary, some grammar structures are learned, but the need for them arises from the task itself. So we learn basically the words and the grammar structures which our students will need to complete this particular task. The order of the stages can be different. For example, sometimes we can start with a task, and then we might introduce some new language to our students while they are doing the task. And if they need this vocabulary or this grammar structure, and then after that, after the task completion, we can analyze the language, we can do some practical tasks, etc. And sometimes we can start with the language focus and we can introduce new vocabulary or new grammar to our students, something that they will need to complete the task. Then we can practice this language. So we can introduce some examples of how the students can complete this task. And after that, they can do the task. They will be ready for that. A lot of teachers and a lot of schools use this approach, but not like for the entire learning process, but for some lessons, for example, like once a month, we can have a task-based lesson. And I really like the idea of a combination of task-based learning and some other approaches. Okay, so let's have a look at the next one. Oh, any ideas? Which approach is illustrated with this picture? That's a communicative approach, of course. I agree with you. Communicative approach or communicative language teaching. Yeah, it's like CLT, the abbreviation. Again, so one of the I guess one of the most popular approaches today, and in the center of this approach, the main focus is on meaningful communication, meaningful, authentic, real-life context. So when teachers use communicative approach, they try to integrate some so-called real-life tasks in the learning process. So, for example, a lot of discussions might be used, role plays, debates, etc. So we can differentiate between stronger CLT, communicative language teaching, and weaker CLT. So the stronger CLT is, the weaker the role of the teacher is. And with weak CLT, so lessons are a bit more teacher-centered, so some more traditional teaching might take place in the lessons. So the teacher might introduce some new language, like new language structures, new vocabulary to the students. They might do some practice tasks, but anyway, the focus is on the communicative task, which they will complete, for example, at the end of the lesson. So basically, everything the students do before a communicative task is to prepare for this task and to make it effective. So let's have a look at the next one. So Irina thinks it's guided discovery, and I agree with you. Yes, it is. Yeah, so guided discovery is an inductive approach, so we can differentiate between deductive and inductive approaches. So deductive approaches, when teachers use a deductive approach, so actually introduction of a new topic starts with explanation. So the teacher explains the new topic to the students and then provides some language examples, some illustrations to it, and then they practice. With inductive approaches, so the order of the stages is different. First of all, the teacher starts with some examples, and with the help of those examples, with some questions and some prompts, the teacher is guiding the students, is in guided discovery. And the teacher is trying to help the students to come up to the explanation, to the correct answers themselves. So the teacher is not explaining the topic, but is trying to help students to come up to the correct answers, correct ideas themselves. And it is believed that this approach helps students memorize the information better, be more active, more involved during the lessons, and it is a very student-centered approach. So we will discuss guided discovery a bit more today, and we will have a look at some examples of how we can use it in the lesson. And the last one. I think it's really easy to guess. So the picture is very straightforward. It's a very obvious illustration to one of the approaches. Yeah, when students need to do something physically, like to move. Oh, any ideas? Okay, so actually this picture is for TPR, total physical response. Yeah, Irina, thank you. Okay, yeah, I can see. I can see answers in the chat. Victoria, Yana, Irina, yeah, you're right. TPR, total physical response. In this approach, with this approach, the focus is on speaking and listening skills, and it is believed that the students can learn new structures, new language patterns when they respond like physically to the commands or to the instructions of the teacher. So for example, the teacher says stand up and the students stand up. The teacher says jump and students jump, yeah, etc. So it is believed that this approach resembles the way how the students acquire their first language naturally. And it is thought to be like very natural, very intuitive. And a plus is that the students are not pushed to speak until they are ready. So it is believed that the students will, so when students get enough language experience after like listening to the teacher speaking English and completing some commands or some instructions of the teacher, they will get enough language experience and then they will be ready to start speaking English naturally. And when they are ready, they will start doing it and the teacher doesn't even have to ask them to do. So this approach is very commonly used with really young learners and with students whose level of English is very low. It is rarely used and it's really difficult to use with the students whose level of English proficiency is high and with older students. But we do use some elements of it actually with any students. So we might use some TPR elements for such topics as, for example, directions or emotions or movements, irregular verbs with students of any age and of different levels. Good. So thank you. You can share in the chat. It would be really interesting to know elements of which approaches do you use in your lessons. Yeah, so maybe you have recognized your lessons in one of those descriptions. So please share with us which approaches are most common for you and for your classroom. If you haven't used any of these approaches yet, like any elements of it, but you want to implement some elements of it in your lessons in the future, you can also share with us in the chat. Julia says that she uses task-based learning elements, communicative approach, and guided discovery. That's interesting. Task-based learning, TPR, audiolingual with drills. Great. Okay, you can also share with us which ones you haven't used, but you would like to start. Okay, thank you. Good. 1, 2, 3, the most. That's audiolingual, task-based, communicative. Natalie, these ones are the most common in your classroom. Okay, thank you. Anna says TPR for children, TBL, and audiolingual. Good. Okay. So not so many people mention guided discovery, actually. It's one of my favorite approaches. So we will discuss it today. I will show you an example of I will show you an example of some tasks which can be used for a lesson in which guided discovery is used. So maybe you will want to use it more in your lessons in the future. Good. So thank you so much. And now, so we have discussed with you some teaching approaches, some methods, and we will continue discussing this topic, and we will also start talking about receptive skills. So actually, we will start practicing receptive skills. And now I will have a small task for you. So I will ask you to watch a video. It will be related to the topic of teaching approaches and methods and also techniques. And I will also ask you to complete a listening task. So we will just combine two things. So 1 second. Yep. Okay. So we will watch a video about teaching approaches and methods and techniques, and it will be our listening task. So we will also improve our listening skills. And after that, we will discuss what instructions I gave you, how I asked you to do the task, and maybe you would be able to give some recommendations to me on how I can improve listening task settings. Okay. So now your listening task. Now you have to watch the video. So please just watch the video. Yeah, so that is your first task. Please let me know in the chat whether you can hear the video.
Is going to focus on the theories, methods, and techniques. And we're going to start with a quote. This is an interesting quotation because it contains within it a philosophical argument. And it's a philosophical argument of the way in which we learn. Basically, this one is saying that the intelligence of their own children comes about due to a natural process. So this one could be said to be due to nature. This is exactly the opposite of this one, which is saying that their teaching, the environment that we create, creates that intelligence. So this one can be said to be due to nurture. And this argument, nature versus nurture, has been going on for thousands of years.
Okay, I'm sorry, I can see that it's lagging a little bit. So let me use another connection and we will try again.
Ever been created has its starting point somewhere on this scale. Before looking at the methods or approaches themselves, there are some terms that we need to define. These are the approach, the method, or the technique. Basically, these are hierarchical. The approach is an overriding set of principles that a method can actually make use of. Whereas the technique are the things that we actually do in the classroom to...
Okay, so actually that's it. It has stopped, but it was the end of the video. Okay, so now the next task for you is to answer the questions which you can see on the screen. So I won't ask you to type your answers to the chat because it will take a long time, but you can think about the answers to the questions, and you can think whether it is easy for you to answer those questions, whether you know the answers. So all the questions relate to the information from the video. Yeah, and in the chat, you can share with us whether it is easy for you to answer the questions which you can see on the screen. Whether if you were a student, you would be able to complete this task successfully. So I'll give you just some seconds to look through the questions, think whether you know the answers, and share with us in the chat whether it would be easy or difficult for you to answer them in a lesson if you were a student. Okay, so don't be shy, share with us in the chat. So Irina types, if I were a student, I think I'd fail to answer the questions properly. Fast listening is just for gist, Jana says. Okay, for gist, but not for such detailed questions. Okay, I agree with you, yeah? So I have watched this video like for many times, but like still, it would be difficult even for me to answer those questions. Yeah, if I'm not given those questions before I started watching the video, so actually you didn't know what to focus on, you didn't know what you need to do. Yeah, you didn't have enough information from me, like on how you need to listen to this audio, or what you need to pay attention to. It is difficult. Yes, Svetlana says it's difficult as you don't know what information you need to find and you don't see the questions before. And that was my mistake. And that is a very common mistake, which can occur in the lesson. And actually, there were some more mistakes in the task setting, and you can also type in the chat some recommendations like what I could have done better to set this listening task for you. So this task was not effective. It didn't help you develop your listening skills. It was time consuming because like the questions are rather difficult and the answers are very complex. But what should I have done to make this task better? Yulia says, listen one more time. Okay, I should have asked you whether you need to listen to the audio one more time. Yeah, and if you need, we should do it. Okay, any other recommendations? How to improve this task? No lead-in before the video. Okay, so no pre-teaching of new words. Yeah, and some words were like really difficult. So probably some words were blocking vocabulary, and I should have pre-taught them, like taught them before watching the video. Yulia also thinks that maybe slow down the recording. Yeah, probably, because his pace of speech is really high. Yana suggests that first of all, we can watch to understand the main idea only, just have one more task, yeah, and then we can watch and answer those questions. Anna agrees with Irina. We must listen to this video like more times. So pre-teach the difference between nature and nurture. Yeah, of course. So those words might be difficult even for high-level students. Yeah, even B2 or C1 students might not know what nurture is. So it's a good idea to pre-teach it before watching this video. Okay, thank you. So let's see like what other mistakes were there. So you have mentioned it. There was no clear lead-in. So I don't think it was really interesting for you to watch this video because like I said, like, okay, let's watch a video. It will be about teaching approaches, yeah? But there was no clear lead-in. So I didn't try to raise your interest to the topic or like to activate your knowledge on the topic before we start watching. And no clear lead-in makes a task less interesting and less effective for the students. So I should have added something before watching the video. So I didn't give you the task before listening. As a result, you didn't know what to focus on. You didn't know whether you need to get the main idea only. You didn't know whether you need to take notes on some details, yeah, or on some factual information. So you didn't know why and how you need to listen to this audio. As a result, you didn't develop any sub-skill. Yeah, it was not effective. We started with detailed listening, yeah, or listening for detailed comprehension. And in the chat, I really liked your ideas that, like, first of all, the first listening should be listening for gist, like for the main idea only, or for specific information, but not for details. So this task with very detailed questions should have been like the second or the third listening task with this audio. Also, I didn't ask you if you need to listen again, and you needed to listen again, but I ignored this. I never asked you, and we just moved on. But yeah, so obviously one more listening was needed. So today we will discuss with you how we can set listening and reading tasks better. So today we will focus on receptive skills only. So we won't discuss productive skills, but we will focus on teaching listening and reading. So the process of teaching listening and reading and the sub-skills which are used are very similar. So we will just talk about reading and listening in one block, like together. And we all know that when we read or when we listen to something in the real life, we use different techniques, or we use different sub-skills, and it all depends on our aim, or on how much information we need to get, how deeply we need to understand the text. Like, for example, sometimes in the real life, we need to read, let's say, a document, like a contract, or a paragraph from a textbook very attentively, and we need to process, to interpret, to analyze this information. So we need to focus on details and have a deep understanding of the material, of the content. But sometimes we just, like, for example, we want to decide whether a new book will be interesting for us. So we can just look through the annotation very quickly without reading every word, and just trying to get the general idea, the general topic of the book. If we see a timetable, we don't read every word in this timetable, but we are looking for some numbers or some names which we're interested in. And we might read like this part, only this part of this table in a more detailed way. The same with listening. So sometimes we focus on the main idea only, sometimes we focus on details, and sometimes we do need to take notes on some numbers, names, dates, etc. So we use different sub-skills. And there are like 3 main reading and listening sub-skills. You've mentioned most of them in the chat already. So these are listening or reading for gist, listening or reading for specific information or for specific details, and reading or listening for detailed comprehension or for details. So during our lessons, we want to make sure we help our students develop all the 3 sub-skills. And we can't develop all of them like doing one task. So we need to have different tasks which will focus on a particular sub-skill, and we need to have a balance. So now let's practice with you a bit. So I will show you some tasks from the textbooks. Your task would be to look at the task, look at the instruction to the task, and think which sub-skill, which reading or listening sub-skill this task helps to develop. So let's start with the first one. The task is to read the article and match the headlines with the paragraphs. So which sub-skill can we help our students to develop with the help of this task? Is it reading for gist, for specific information, or for detailed comprehension? Victoria thinks for gist. Okay. For specific information. So for gist or for specific? Any other ideas? Okay, so this one is actually for gist. For gist, because so we need to match the headlines with the article, with the paragraphs, and the headline it's like to find a headline for the paragraph, we need to get the main information of this paragraph only. So the headline is what this paragraph is about. And to understand what it's about, like in general, we just need to look through the information very quickly, understand what topic it refers to, and then choose a corresponding headline. So this is reading for gist. What's important when we have or when we set tasks which focus on reading or listening for gist? So we need to make sure our students focus only on the general idea. So we don't want our students to read every word in the text. And it's really important because it's like a separate sub-skill. So for gist reading tasks, we want our students to look through the text very quickly without reading every word and getting only the general idea. So the students need to ignore unknown words. So they need to ignore some structures which they do not understand. They just focus on what they understand in this part, and they need to get like the general topic, and that's it. So if it's listening, if it's a listening task, then we will listen only once, and then we will have feedback on the task. Also, what's really important when we set reading for gist tasks, we need to set like very short timing, because if we give too much time to our students, they will start reading every word in the text. Yeah, and sometimes they can also ask like, well, what is the meaning of this word? I don't know this word, but we don't need it for gist reading, so it won't help us to develop this particular skill. So we want to give very short timing to our students, like for example, 30 seconds to look through the text, or 1 minute, or maybe 2 minutes if the text is really long. Yeah, and we can even ask our students, like, okay, guys, you've got just 1 minute to look through the text. Do you think you need to read every word in the text, or do you need just to look through it very quickly? Yeah, and the students can give you the answer, and you will make sure they know how to do this task, how to read, so that it can help them to develop this particular sub-skill. Good, so let's have a look at the second task. So which sub-skill is practiced with the help of this task? The students need to listen to the audio, and they need to write true or false. So they need to understand whether the statements are true or false, according to the information given in the text, or in the audio, in this case. Detailed comprehension. Okay, so this one is for detailed comprehension, right? You are. For details or for detailed comprehension. And in this case, the students need to read or listen to every word and analyze the text. So very often, like almost always, of course, it depends on the level of English proficiency of the students, yeah, but like usually we don't have the same word like in the text and in the task. So in the tasks, some paraphrases, some synonyms, antonyms are used. So the students need to read the text or listen to the text, understand it, pay attention to the details, and analyze the text. So very often they need to look for some paraphrases, antonyms, synonyms, etc. They also sometimes need to analyze some connotations or the shades of the meaning, or they need to differentiate between like direct and figurative meaning of some words in the text. And so when we give such tasks for our students, of course, we want to make sure they have enough time. So if for gist reading, we would have like 1 minute, sometimes 30 seconds even, then for detailed comprehension, we would have more time to our students. If it's a listening task, we might want to ask our students whether they need to listen one more time. Yeah, so maybe they need like sometimes they need to re-listen to the text, yeah, to be able to complete the task and to understand it more deeply. Good. And let's have a look at this third one. Of course. Okay, I think that the like it's obvious that the third sub-skill is for the third task. So, and this one is finally listening for specific information. Right, you are. And in this task, we are focusing on some facts, like some factual information. So we're focusing on names, numbers, and dates. If you look at this task, you might see that in all gaps, except for the last one, we need to use a number. Yeah, so while we are listening to the audio, we will be focusing on numbers. If it's a text, again, while looking through the text, we will be focusing, like, for example, on numbers or on names. So something that is easily visible and noticeable in the text, even if you are not like, if you're just looking at it, yeah, if you're just looking at the text, you don't have to read it to notice some numbers or some names because they are like from the capital letter, or some dates. And that is like this sub-skill. It's reading or listening for specific information. So the students are just, if it's reading, the students are just looking through the text. They find a number or a name which they're interested in, and they read only this part of the text in a more detailed way. If it's listening, so our students are focusing on names, numbers, and dates, and when they hear something that they're interested in, they start listening to this part of the audio in a more detailed way. So specific information tasks usually focus on names, numbers, and dates, or like geographical names, for example. Okay, good. So, and in our lessons, we need to make sure that we keep a balance. So we need to make sure that we help our students develop all the 3 sub-skills. So we need to understand which tasks is focused on which sub-skill and in which order we can give them to our students. And let's look at the lesson stages. So possible lesson stages for a reading or a listening lesson. Yeah, so as you've mentioned in the chat, it's a good idea to start with a reading. Before we give our students a listening task or a reading task, we need to set up the context. So we can use some visuals, some real life objects, or we can ask some personal questions. So something to set this context, to create this context, and to activate our students' interest. Then we can have a pre-text discussion, and actually that's a good idea to do it. It can be pair or group work. Sometimes it can be also done in open class. Yeah, and we can ask our students to discuss questions related to the topic. Or also we can use some prediction tasks. Prediction tasks are very common for pre-text discussions. Or also we can ask our students to brainstorm and discuss some ideas related to the topic of the text or of the audio. So speaking about prediction tasks, they might be various. Like, for example, look at the pictures and try to guess what the text is about. Or look at the pictures and try to put them in the chronological order, and then we will listen to the audio and we will check whether you are right. Or look at the title of the text and try to guess what the style of the text is, or who this text will be about. And then it will be your gist, reading, or listening task. We can just tell our students, okay, let's check our predictions, and we'll read the text or listen to the audio. Or we can ask our students to brainstorm, like, for example, the text will be about some traveling tips. So we would ask our students to brainstorm some tips which can help people prepare for a trip. And then they will read the text and see whether there are the same ideas in the text. So after the pre-text discussion, we can have reading or listening one. So we read or listen to the text for the first time. And first reading or listening is usually for gist or for specific information, and of course feedback after that. So you could see that it's a bad idea to start with detailed comprehension, listening and reading tasks. So first of all, we want to let our students get the main idea, get acquainted with the text, and focus on the general information or on some specific information. And reading and listening too can be for detailed comprehension, and then we can have feedback. So if we have enough time and if we want to work on all sub-skills in one lesson, of course we can have 3 reading or listening 3. So for example, reading, listening 1 will be for gist, 2 for specific information, 3 for detailed comprehension. After that, so this stage is optional, but I like to have it. It's a brief post-text discussion. So it's kind of feedback on content. So we let our students respond to the ideas of the text, and it helps to personalize the text, personalize the information for them. They can share what they think, whether they agree or disagree with the ideas from the text, what they like most of all. If they disagree, they might, so you might ask them to change some parts of the text so that it's more relevant for them. But this stage is optional. And instead of a brief post-text discussion, we can have a productive follow-up. So again, if we have a lot of time, we can have both. Yeah, but usually we choose between a brief post-text discussion or a productive follow-up. And a productive follow-up is focused on writing or speaking. So if it's a reading lesson, then in most cases we would focus on writing. so when we have the production follow-up, if it's a listening lesson, then the productive follow-up can be to practice speaking, develop speaking skills. And yeah, so at this stage, we can ask our students to like generate some ideas or to produce some ideas. So for example, they can use the text as an example, and they can create a similar story. Or they can create with their partner a similar dialogue to what they have listened to. They can write their own recipe, yeah, if you have read a recipe before it, or they can come up with 5 more tips which haven't been mentioned in the text. They can continue a story. Yeah, think of the continuation of a fictional story, for example. And then we will have feedback. As it is a productive task, then we will need to have both feedback on content, so meaning like that it's feedback on the ideas which the students have generated or discussed, and then we will have feedback on language, so feedback on accuracy. We will focus on language accuracy during this task. And there is one more thing which you have also mentioned in the chat, that's blocking vocabulary. So blocking vocabulary are some unknown words or structures which the students will see in the text or will hear in the audio. And these are the words and the structures without understanding which the students won't be able to complete a task. So they might be different unknown words in the text, but not all of them are blocking vocabulary. So it is okay if some words in the text are unknown. We don't have to pre-teach all of them, but we need to focus on blocking vocabulary. So usually blocking words or like blocking vocabulary are some words which are used in the task, or they are used in the part of the text which justifies the answer to a particular task. Like, for example, to choose a true or false, like for this number, for this question, the student needs to read a particular part of the text. And if in this part of the text there is a word with potential the student doesn't know, it means that the student won't be able to complete the task, not because his or her reading skills are not developed well, but because like the student just doesn't understand this word and it's blocking vocabulary, it blocks the task completion. So we need to look through the text and understand whether there are some blocking words, and we might pre-teach blocking vocabulary before reading or listening one, which is less common. Like in most cases, for gist or specific information, reading or listening, our students don't need to focus like on the unknown words, like on some details, but it might be. So more commonly, blocking vocabulary is pre-taught before reading or listening for detailed comprehension. Yeah, so and it's really important to think like how you can pre-teach this vocabulary. So for example, if it is a listening task, then pronunciation is really important, because if the students don't know the pronunciation of a word, they won't be able to hear it in the audio. So when we pre-teach blocking vocabulary before listening tasks, then we need to focus on meaning and we need to focus on pronunciation. Spelling is optional. Spelling is important if they will see this word like in the task, or they will need to take notes. If you pre-teach blocking vocabulary before a reading task, then we need to pre-teach meaning, form, like spelling, because they will need to find this word in the text. And pronunciation might be optional, so you might skip it, or you might want to pre-teach it if you want your students to like then say this word or say the answers out loud, or use this word in the discussion or productive follow-up, for example. Okay, and let's see an example. Yeah, what it can look like in a lesson. So it's a reading lesson. The level is A2, and the topic is traveling. So as an introduction or a lead-in, I would show 3 pictures to my students, and I would ask them like, okay, so look at these 3 means of transportation. So which one is the fastest? Yeah, or which one is the most comfortable, the cheapest, the most expensive? And very quickly, like in open class, we can discuss some ideas. Then we would have a pre-text discussion. So I would ask my students to discuss 3 questions in pairs or in small groups. And these questions refer to their personal experience with traveling. Yeah, and all these questions are like related to the topic of the text, which they will read after. Then we have feedback, like very quickly. And then we have the first reading task. So the students need to read the article and match the headlines with the paragraphs. So that is reading for gist. So we will not pre-teach blocking vocabulary at this stage. It is not needed for this task. Then the students would need to read the text one more time, and they need to answer the questions. And this time it will be reading for detailed comprehension, and it's reading too. After that, we will have a very brief post-text discussion. It will be in open class or in pairs if we have enough time. And I would ask the students whether they agree with the recommendations from the text and whether they can add more. So we will do it like very, very briefly. And after that, we would have a productive follow-up. In this task, the students will need to choose the topic and prepare the speech. So the topic of the text, so the text is about some tips which can help us to prepare for a trip, to make it less stressful. And then as a productive follow-up, so the students will discuss or they can also take notes. So it can be either a speaking or a writing follow-up, and we can ask our students, for example, to compare pre-planned traveling, which the text was about, or spontaneous trips. So it can be like in a different forum. We can have a debate, or it can be a writing follow-up because we have been practicing reading skills. So we can ask our students to write a couple of paragraphs on the topic and then present it. So if we don't have enough time for all the stages, I might want to skip a brief post-text discussion. And if we have like very, very little time left, I can skip productive follow-up and I can have a brief post-text discussion. And maybe in the next lesson, then we will focus on productive skills more. Yeah, so it all depends on the timing and we can be flexible with it. Okay, good. And let's have a look at some tips which can help us set reading and listening tasks effectively. So as we've already discussed with you, a task should be provided before each reading or listening task. So we don't ask our students just to read the text or like listen to the audio because they won't know how to do it and why to do it. As a result, no sub-skill will be developed. Then the timing depends on the sub-skill practiced. Yeah, it's more about reading tasks. So if it's a just reading task, then the timing should be very short. If it's a detailed reading task, then we will make sure to give enough time for our students. It's a good idea to tell our students or elicit from our students how to work with the text. Again, we can ask them whether they need to read every word or whether they just look through the text very quickly, whether they need to focus on unknown words or maybe they need to ignore them. And we also again ask our students to look for justifications for their answers. And it's a very important step for detailed reading or listening tasks. So we can ask our students to underline the part of the text or like a sentence in a text which proves the answer to a particular question. Or if it's a listening task, we might want to ask our students to take notes which can prove their answer. Be ready that students might need to listen to the audio one more time, and that's okay, so that's fine. It won't make the task like more effective if you say like, no, we just need to listen to the audio once and then you need to complete the task. So if your students are not ready for that yet and they need to listen again, we can do it. Yeah, but we need to mind the timing. So while planning the lesson, we need to think like, what will I do if my students need to listen to the audio one more time? So which tasks then can I skip if I don't have enough time in this lesson? Or how I can adjust the final stage, yeah, to save some time if my students need to listen multiple times. That's a good idea to prepare a script if you have a listening lesson. So sometimes you might want to refer to the script if you're not sure in the answer, if your students have doubts whether this answer is correct or not. So you can use the script like to quickly find this part and find justifications for some answers. And of course, feedback and checking answers depends on the sub-skill. So if it's gist reading or gist listening, feedback will be very quick. So we'll just ask our students a couple of questions in open class, or we will just send them the answers in the chat and ask them whether everything is correct. So when we give feedback after detailed comprehension, reading or listening tasks, we want to do it in a more thorough way. So we want to elicit the answers from the students, and we want to ask them for justifications. Yeah, like the parts of the text which can prove their answer. It will help us make sure that the students really use the text and really analyze it while completing the task, that it's not just a guess game. Okay. So thank you. A lot of information. Yeah, and you were very active in the chat. So now we will relax a little bit. So you will relax and you will imagine that you're my students. So we will discuss systems. Yeah, so in the next block of this webinar, we will talk about teaching systems, vocabulary, grammar, and functional language. But before we do that, we will relax a little bit. So you will imagine that you're my students. We will have a very short lesson demo with you. And I would ask you to participate. So I will ask you a lot of questions. I will ask you to do some tasks. So you can type your answers to the chat, or you can just do it. So you can say your answers to my questions out loud. I won't be able to hear them, but it will resemble, the process of a real lesson. Okay, and now let's look at 3 pictures. And tell me, please, what you can see in these pictures. So did you have these things in the past? And maybe you have them now. Yeah, so speaking about me, I used to have this Tetris toy. So I loved it. So I don't have it now, but I used to play it a lot when I was younger. I used to use a landline. In the past, when I was at school, I used it to talk to my friends. Now I don't have it at home. So, and I used to have a lot of Kinder Surprise toys in the past. I used to collect them, but again, so now I have just 1 or 2 of them. So you can tell me about your experience. So have you used any of these things? Yulia used to use a Tetris when she was a small girl. Okay, yeah, the same about me. I really loved those games. And I guess I would love to play like some Tetris games now. So if you know where I can buy this toy, so you can share this information with me. I would love to do it. And I will show you some more things from my past, so which I found at home. And this is like this toy. It's a Kinder Surprise toy. So I used to collect such toys, and I used to have like maybe 40 or 50 of them. But like recently, I have donated them to my niece. So now it's like, I think it's the last one left in my place. And also I found like this thing. Yeah, it's not a landline, but it's a very old button phone. So I used to use this phone when I was at school. And I used to have like really long nails at that time, and it was really difficult for me to like send messages. Yeah, because like you need to press the buttons to type the text and to send a message. And with really long nails, it was very difficult, very complicated. So I didn't used to send many messages at that time. But now I've got a smartphone, yeah, and I send more messages than I used to. Okay, so you used to collect Kinder Surprise toys too. Okay, that's nice to know. Good, so let's look at some ideas from my story, the story which I told you. So let's look at the first idea. I used to have a collection of Kinder Surprise toys. Now I don't, because I gave them to my niece. And the second one is, I didn't used to send many messages when I had a button phone, but I do it more often now because I've got a smartphone. So now please look at the first sentence, look at the first ideas, and tell me, did I have a collection of Kinder Surprise toys in the past? So did I have those toys in the past? Yeah, so you can just type yes, no. Yes, of course, obviously. Do I have them now? No, I don't. Has the situation changed? Yeah, so in the past I had those toys, now I don't have them. It has changed. Okay. Let's look at the second one. Did I send many messages in the past? Like when I had this phone? No, I didn't. Yeah, because I had extremely long nails. Do I send more messages now? Of course. Has the situation changed? Like in the past, I didn't send a lot of messages. Now I do. Okay, so let's look at this idea again. Did it happen one time in my past, or did it happen like many times? So was it a repeated action? So I didn't used to send many messages. Like, was it like once, or was it a repeated action, like many times? Oh, okay, thank you. So, and you can see that in both sentences, we have the same structure, used to, didn't used to. So let's analyze it. When we use used to, are we talking about something that was true in the past? Yes, okay. Is this something true now? Is it still true, or has it changed? So now it's not, it was true in the past, but now the situation has changed. Good. Can we talk about states? Like, for example, so we have state verbs and we have action verbs. So can we use used to with state verbs? Like I used to have. I used to love Kinder Surprise toys in the past, but now I don't. I used to hate sending messages in the past. So I can, yeah, so I can use used to with states. Are we talking about repeated actions when we use used to, or about actions which happened only one time in the past? Like I didn't used to send many messages, or I used to go to school every day. So we are talking about repeated actions, and we are not using used to talk about something that has happened only once. So now please look at this sentence and think whether it's correct or maybe there is a mistake in it. I used to have a smartphone when I was at the university. So this sentence is about me. I used to have a smartphone when I was at the university. Yeah, and it's incorrect because the situation hasn't changed. So I had a smartphone when I was at the university, and I have a smartphone now. Yeah, so I can't use used to because the situation hasn't changed. Or if, for example, if I say, I used to go to a supermarket yesterday, is it correct or incorrect? I used to go to a supermarket yesterday. Okay, incorrect, you're right, because it happened only once. Yeah, it's not about a habit or repeated action. It's just only about one time, about yesterday. So I can't use used to. Good. So you're very smart. So let's go on. Let's look at the first sentence. So this one is obviously a positive sentence. I used to have. So let's look at the formula of the sentence. So first of all, we have a subject who I, then we have used to, and then we have the verb in the first form. I used to have, not I used to had or having, but the first form, infinitive. I used to have, I used to love, I used to go. Then the second one is a negative sentence. I didn't used to send. So the formula is subject, like who, I, or you, or my friend, then didn't, then used to, and the first form, like infinitive. I didn't used to send, I didn't used to buy, I didn't used to go, I didn't used to love. And so we can also look add a question. So we will not discuss questions with you just to save some time, but with my real students, I would do it. And after that, we can focus on pronunciation. So now please listen to me and tell me, is used to strong? Like, do I stress it? So listen to me and think. I used to have a collection. Yeah, so do I stress used to? Is it strong? No, it's not. So now listen to me and repeat after me. I used to. I used to. I used to have. Okay, so let's listen to the second one. I didn't used to send. So which word is strong? Which word is stress? I didn't used to send. I didn't used to send. So we stress didn't and send. Yeah, so now please repeat after me. I didn't used to send. Okay, so thank you for your participation. So that's it. So after that, I would give my students some practice tasks. So first of all, we would start with controlled practice. So some simple tasks which will help my students to get acquainted with the topic and develop this habit of using the structure correctly. Then we would have one more controlled practice task. Again, we will focus on meaning and on form in this task. So the students need to decide whether to use past simple or used to, and they need to use these structures in the correct form. And then we would have a freer practice task in which the students will discuss some things from the past, and they can use a used to in this discussion. So that was a grammar lesson. And so what do you think? Which lesson framework was used? So which systems lesson framework did I use in this demonstration? So maybe it was test, teach, test, or maybe it was PPP, presentation, practice, production, or maybe it was a text-based presentation. Like, what do you think? Which framework was used? Guided discovery. Like, I agree with you, some elements of guided discovery were used, but it was very teacher-centered. Yeah, I asked you a lot of questions, but I was in the center of this process, so I was like leading it. Yeah, so it was like more teacher-centered than guided discovery usually is. Any other ideas? Like I did use elicitation, as a technique, because I tried to elicit information from you rather than explaining it. But so anyway, so it was teacher-centered because you didn't do it by yourselves. Okay. And that was actually PPP, so presentation, practice, production. Or we can also call it, it was a situational presentation. Like I created some context for you. So it was my personal story. Then based on this context, I provided some sentence examples. And based on those sentence examples, we discussed with you in an inductive way, using some elements of guided discovery, elicitation. So we discussed with you when and how the structure can be used. After that, so that was presentation. Then practice. So there were some practice tasks and production. So there was a freer practice or production task in the end. So what are benefits of this approach, of this framework? It's rather fast. So rather quickly, you can present a new topic to your students because you are in control. So you ask questions, you guide this process, and usually it's faster than when students work like more independently. It is more controlled. So you control the situation. You see that, okay, the answer to this question is incorrect. So I need to ask like one more question or give some more prompts or maybe explain something. That's also fine. So you are in control of the situation. It is universal. So this approach, this framework can be used with like almost any topic, almost any level of English proficiency. So speaking about negative sides of it, it's rather teacher-centered. So TTT is rather high because like constantly I had to ask you a lot of questions and your answers were rather short. So I was talking more than you at this stage. And it is boring if it is repeated all the time. Yeah, it can be interesting sometimes if you tell a personal story or if you like show an interesting picture and you base your context on it, or if you show a photo to your students, it is interesting. But if you do it every time, like each lesson, you start your presentation like that, it becomes very predictable and students can lose their interest if it's the only way of the presentation which you use. It can be used for any levels of English, and this framework can be used to teach grammar, vocabulary, and functional language, so it's really universal. So speaking about the stages, yeah, of course, as usual, we start with a lead-in. So we set up the context. We can use visuals, realia, or questions. In my case, it was a personal so not a personal story yet, but I used some pictures, yeah, first of all, and then I told you my personal story. So then we go to presentation, that's MFP clarification. So we focus on meaning, form, and pronunciation of the targeted language. The presentation is usually based on some context. So it can be a situation, as it was in my case. It can be a picture, a video, etc. And during this presentation stage, we highlight meaning, form, and pronunciation. So first of all, I asked you some questions to check whether you understand the meaning of used to. After that, we worked on form. Yeah, so I elicited the formula of the sentence, and then we practiced pronunciation because I asked you to listen and tell me which words are stressed, and then I asked you to repeat after me. After that, we have controlled practice. So our students need to use the target language in a limited context. So usually these are some very simple tasks. And we can focus on meaning and on form. And then we had a freer practice task in which our students are able to use the targeted language in a freer context, but they can also use other words, other vocabulary, other grammar structures which they know. So they are not limited, but the task is set in such a way so that they can use the targeted language in this task. And then, of course, feedback on content and feedback on accuracy as usual. And now, let's have a look at one more example. It will be the same topic, but a very different lesson. So first of all, you can look at the posters on the screen and please put to the chat the numbers of the series which you have watched or which you know. So we've got A, B, and C. It's Beverly Hills, Friends, and Game of Thrones. Svetlana has watched B and C. What about A? Yana, A, okay. I have never watched A, but I have watched B and C. Okay, and if you were my students, after that, I would ask you to discuss these questions in pairs. So you can look through the questions very quickly. We won't discuss them with you, unfortunately, but you can look through them just to have a general idea. And after that, okay, not yet. 1 second. So after that, I would give the students this worksheet. Yeah, so you can see the link in the chat. You don't have to open it now on your gadget because I will show it on my screen, but you can save this link and you can have a look like after the webinar. It will stay with you. So let's just look through the tasks, look through the stages very quickly, and you can put to the chat which lesson framework is used in this lesson. So first of all, we ask our students to like discuss the questions, look at the posters, Then they have the next task, and in this task, they need to look through the memories of the people, and they need to match the paragraphs with the posters A, B, and C. So after that, we have feedback, so we check the answers, obviously, and then the students go to task 3, and they do this task individually. They do this task individually and then compare their answers, their ideas in pairs. So they need to look at the sentences taken from the text. All the sentences are from the text, and they need to answer the questions. So you can see that both sentences, both examples contain the targeted grammar. So it's ES2. And the questions are focused on the meaning of the structure. So the students discuss, like, did Anna watch TV series when she was at school? So very similar questions to the ones which I asked you, but it's not teacher-led, teacher-centered. So the students are discussing the questions in pairs, yeah, and after that we check it in open class. After that, they have task 4. It's focused on the meaning of the structure, and they need to complete the rule with the words from the box. We check it. Then the students go to task 5. They need to find the examples in the text and write them down to fill in the table, and they have a very detailed example with color coding, like for the first one. So they have an example of a positive sentence, and they see, like, okay, subject, it is green, like most people of my age used to, it's like dark green. Then verb 1, so infinitive, it's watch, yeah. So they see what like these abbreviations or letters mean. Then they need to do the same with a negative sentence and a question, and they need to find the examples in the text. It's really important. They do the task individually, then they compare in pairs, then we check in open class. Then we do task 6. So the students listen to the teacher and they mark the stressed words. We check it. Then the students repeat the pronunciation after the teacher. So it's the pronunciation focus. After that, the students complete a controlled practice task. We check it. Then the students complete task 8, which is also a controlled practice task, but it is more challenging because they need to correct the mistakes and rewrite the sentences. We check it. And then they complete task 9A, which is the beginning of a freer practice task. So they need to make up some questions, they need to interview the partners, they need to write their answers. Yeah, and then in task 9B, they will need to share some interesting facts about their partner with other group mates. So what do you think? Which framework is this? So the last example, the last demo lesson was PPP, presentation practice production. What about this one? So what do you think? Like most part of the lesson, students are working individually and in groups. The teacher is there, yeah, but the lesson is very student-centered. So the teacher is just monitoring, and if needed, is micro-teaching and helping to check the answers. Yeah, but for the most part of the lesson, the students are working individually, independently, with the help of the tasks which were created by the teacher. So which framework is this? Guided discovery. So this one is guided discovery. So let's look at positive and negative sides of guided discovery. So you could see that it is very student-centered. So if we had this lesson with you, so when you observe a lesson in which guided discovery is used, it might seem that the teacher is doing nothing, like the students are doing all the work, the students are discussing, the students are doing the task, the students are trying to figure out the new topic. And the teacher is just walking, monitoring, and sometimes helps to check the answers. Yeah, so it is very student-centered. And as the students are actively engaged during the whole lesson, the information is very memorable for them. So they come up to the explanations, to the rules, to the logic themselves, and they remember this topic very well, and it is really engaging. So it is interesting for the students. It might be a bit boring for the teacher, but it's really interesting for the students because they are actively involved like all the time. Speaking about negative aspects, it requires a lot of preparation. So I didn't find a suitable text in any of the textbooks which I have. So the text which will be like interesting for my students and which will contain some relevant language examples. So I created like everything from scratch. So I created task 1, task 2, like the text itself, all tasks for guided discovery, like task 3, task 4, task 5, task 6. So I did it all by myself, and it took a lot of time. So then some practice tasks I took from some textbooks or from online sources. Yeah, so during the lessons, the teacher seems to be doing like not much, but before the lesson, the teacher spends a lot of time preparing for this lesson and designing the text. It might be not suitable for some topics, and it is more time consuming. So the students need more time to discover the topic in a student-centered way compared to teacher-centered formats. It might be suitable for students whose level is A2 and higher. It might be used for lower levels as well, but it's really challenging to create a task which will be graded and suitable for lower levels. Commonly, it is used to teach grammar and functional language. Less common, it is used to teach vocabulary, but like it's also possible. And the stages are leading, of course, we set up the context. So we had the task with the posters, that was my leading. Then reading for gist. So it can be reading or listening. In my case, it was reading for gist. So they had to look through the text quickly and match the posters with the headlines. Then noticing the target language. The students had some tasks, which helped them to notice the target structure used to, it was highlighted. And then they had some tasks which were focused on meaning, form, and pronunciation of the structure. Then, as usual, controlled practice, freer practice, and feedback. And it's really important to have an appropriate text to use this approach or to use this framework effectively. So the text, so this was the text. In this worksheet, the text should be short. So we don't want, it's not a reading lesson. We don't want to spend the whole lesson just reading to a text. It needs to be really short and not time consuming. There should be no unknown things in the text except for the target language. So we focus on the target language only. We don't want our students to see other difficult words or a lot of blocking vocabulary in the text. So the focus is on the target grammar or vocabulary. You need to make sure that the context of the text and of the sentence makes the meaning of the target language obvious. So you need to make sure there are enough time phrases, time expressions, some markers of the structure so that the students will be able, analyzing this text, to come up to the correct explanations, correct rules by themselves. And the text should be graded, so we should use the words which our students are supposed to know according to their level. Okay, and like very quickly, let's have a look at one more worksheet. I will not comment that much, but we will see like what's the difference. Again, the topic is the same, used to, and the context for this lesson is appearance. Like, first of all, we will discuss some pictures. We will say like, okay, it's a girl in the past, and now. So what has changed? Does she have the same hair now? So would you recognize her if you didn't know that it's her, etc. And then so you can see a description of this lesson here. It's not a lesson plan, it's not a worksheet, but it's just a description of what's happening in the lesson. So I won't read everything, I'll just pay your attention to some points here quickly. Yeah, so first of all, the teacher shows a picture of herself in the past and asks what has changed. So she shows her personal picture and just a couple of questions. That's just a lead-in. Then After that, the teacher gives a task at once. So students get task 1A, and they need to do a test. So they just need to choose the correct option. So students are doing the task, and the teacher is monitoring very attentively. And she is paying attention to the answers of the students, and she is taking some notes. And she notices, so that there were some common mistakes related to some aspects of this topic. Then very quickly, they check the answers together. The answers are just on the board. They are not discussing them yet. The students just check the task themselves. After that, the teacher puts 2 pictures from the task on the board, so the same pictures they had in the task, and the teacher elicits some meaning aspects. But she focuses only on the aspect in which the students had mistakes. So it was problematic for them because they used to talk about things which were true in the past and are still true. So that was a common mistake. And during stage 2, they were discussing only this aspect. And after that, they focused on form, again, focusing only on common mistakes which the students had, only on those aspects. So this stage is really quick. After that, the teacher gives the students task 2. So the students complete task 2. It's a controlled practice task. Then they check it together. And in this, so after this task, the teacher is eliciting the answers. They spend more time checking this task. They discuss it. So the teacher asks for justifications in open class, like she asks, like, why did you use this structure? Why do you think it's a correct answer? And they discuss it all together. Then the students complete task 3. It's a form-based task, a form-focused task. Then students check each other's worksheets with the answers on the screen. After that, they have a productive task, so they have a free practice task. So what do you think? Which framework is this? So we've discussed with you PPP, text-based presentation, or guided discovery, and the third one is... Okay, so I'm sure you know the answer. So that is TTT, or test, teach, test. So the positive moments of this framework is that it is student-oriented. So we focus on the needs of our students. While our students are completing test 1, we are very attentive, and we make conclusions on which aspects of this topic are problematic for the students. Then during the clarification stage, we focus only the most difficult things. It is time-saving because we don't have to cover all aspects of this topic. We cover only something that our students don't know yet, and it is rather effective, because we address only the problematic moments. A lot of preparation is needed. That's a negative moment. It's very demanding from the teacher because the teacher needs to be very, very, very attentive. And the teacher needs to be able to make decisions on the spot. For example, the tasks which you have designed before the lesson might not be addressing the needs of your students, and you might realize it after test 1. So then very quickly, you need to make a decision and change this task on the spot. It is commonly used with A2 and higher levels. It can be used to teach vocabulary. It's more common. Less common is functional language and grammar, but still possible. And the stages. So as always, we start with a lead-in, so we set the context. Then we have test 1. It's a controlled practice task, and we monitor very closely. Then we clarify meaning, form, and pronunciation, but we focus only on relevant aspects, and we address the problems which our students had. Then we have test 2. It's one more controlled practice task, and we check whether our students are more successful now. If no, we will have one more controlled practice task if needed. Then we can have a freer practice task and feedback as usual. Okay, so actually that's it for today. So we have discussed with you different approaches and methods, and we have discussed with you lesson frameworks for receptive skills lessons and systems lessons. So thank you so much. I would love to get some feedback from you, and you can share in the chat so which pieces of information were the most useful for you. We will also share the link to the Padlet board to the chat. So you can also share your ideas on this board, answering questions 3 and 4. So we would be happy to get feedback from you, or you can just use the chat for that. So I hope that it was useful and you will use some of the ideas in your lessons in the nearest future. So thank you so much.
So thank you, Ola, for a productive session. Yeah, so that was really interesting. I would love to watch the episode of Friends, yeah, to practice a little. Okay, so thank you everyone for participating. And I'm reminding that that was the third webinar of the course lesson planning. So pre-final, yes. So the next one will be on Wednesday in a week, the final one. And the recording of this webinar will be added in your material section in 24 hours. So if you missed something, you will be able to watch it again. And in a week, we are meeting up with you and our second trainer, Alina Korshunova. So that was our final session, Ola. So thank you so much for participating and holding the fourth, I guess, yes, launch of the course. Yeah, lesson planning. So thank you so much. And I do hope we'll see in future each other, yeah, for future courses.
Yeah. So thank you so much. And one more thing I want to say. So you can save the links to the worksheets and the documents which I showed during this webinar. And you will also get the recording of this webinar, and you will see the QR codes in the video. So you, if you haven't saved the links today, so you can just scan the codes in the recording, and you will have access to all the materials.
Yes, yeah. So the QRs will be in the video, so in the recording, yeah, so you will be able to watch. Okay, thank you so much, and see you in a week. Before the next webinar, the same, I'm just reminding, look through the material section, and the next one will be the final one with our second trainer, Alina Korshunova, and we will talk with you about common difficulties and assessment, yeah, so do not hesitate and join. That would be great if you join and participate live. Okay, so thank you so much and have a nice evening. See you. Bye.